Okay. How do you feel that IB is different from any other system at the school, such as Ag Science, CP, or maybe in other schools like AP?
Well, I think it is an honors program, so it shares with other honors programs your ability level grouping students. You are teaching a strong college, true college prep curriculum. I think where it differs from other programs like that is that IB tends to have a strong international component. There's a global component that attempts to not just look at the Western canon, for example, in HA1, which I taught for a number of years. HA1 dealt with history of the Americas, which meant that you were doing comparisons between the United States and Latin America, which I thought was very valuable. In the philosophy class that I teach, there's a very strong non-Western component. I know in the English curriculum, one of the things that I think is the most fabulous about the what IB does is that you guys read things that are from completely out of the Western canon, and I see that as a hugely valuable point.
Okay. And then, as a teacher, did you personally gain anything from teaching IB?
Enormously, and I could go on and on about this one. Teaching IB stretches you because when you deal with students that are highly motivated and are interested in the subjects that you teach, it pushes you to expand what you can offer your students. Also, the subjects that I've taught have really developed me as a teacher. I mean, when I first taught HA1, I had no idea about anything in Latin American history, and I did a lot of reading, took some classes, and it really opened my eyes to the fact that there really is a great divide that exists between Latin America and the United States, and it made me more interested in why that occurred and what we could do about it.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of philosophy, I kind of fell into philosophy. I was not the person that was intended to teach it at first, and then Ms. Sorgen asked if I would teach it, and again, I had to all of a sudden become an expert on philosophy, which I'm not really an expert, but I know a lot more than I did 5 years ago.
Right.
And that's fundamentally transformed my whole outlook on life. Same thing with theory. I taught theory for a couple of years, and that theory was an eye-opening experience. It taught me to look at the idea of what we know and how we know it in a fundamentally different way. So I would say that IB for me has been very much like a dialogue. It has developed me not just as a teacher, but as a person.
That's good to hear. Okay. As a teacher, then, what would you expect from your students? Now we know what we can expect from you, but what did you expect from your students as an IB person coming in?
I'll be honest with you. There's really only one expectation, and it has been on every IB syllabus. In fact, I think it's been on every syllabus that I've printed for the last 12 years, and that's interest. If you're not interested in what you're studying, you don't belong in IB. I know that sounds blunt, but interest is key.
Right.
And interest is something that is cultivated. It's not just a matter of, well, these are the things that interest me. Interest is something that it's partly a matter of self-discipline. It's partly a matter of saying, I'm going to be interested in many things. That would be probably the biggest thing that I want to see in IB students, a sense of curiosity, really, about the world around them and how things work and why things work as they do. In philosophy, we would say that we want students to do things for the intrinsic value of those things and not to view their school activities as somehow instrumental. I'm going to do this to achieve this, and I realize that's a tall order because of course IB students have college aspirations and so forth, and we have to keep that as teachers in mind as well. But I think that when college aspirations and career aspirations and advancement become the only goal, then you kind of lose out. So really, curiosity and interest, that's my only criteria. You give me those two things, and I think as an IB teacher, I could work with any student.
Okay. And then, what is something about the IB program that dissatisfies you? What would you like to change? And maybe, you don't have to answer this, but how so, if you had the opportunity to?
That's really a hard question because
Yeah.
my experience with IB has very positive. Two things, one less important, one more important. The less important would be, IB is headquartered out of Cardiff in Wales, and
Yeah,
I think most of the people who organize it are used to the British school system, and they seem to think that that's the way everything works. And I don't think sometimes they understand that there are IB schools that are not, like Hogwarts. There are IB schools that are they're like us, that deal with the ordinary problems that modern American public schools deal with. So that sometimes that's frustrating. That's the smaller one. The bigger one would be kind of related to the previous question, and that is that I too often will have students who, and have had students who are almost completely instrumental in their approach to their education. Education is all about, that college acceptance letter. It's all about, getting the resume padded, and that's part of it. I don't deny that, and as a teacher, we have to understand that's important. But when that becomes everything, teaching a class like philosophy with people that have that view, there's no point to it. I mean, there's really no point in learning philosophy if your whole goal is just instrumental. I don't know. Find another class.
True. That's very true.
That's blunt, but I mean that's the greatest dissatisfaction that I would say that I have. Now, having said that, I don't think that's predominant. I think that IB tends to select for students that have more intrinsic interest, and I think that's one of the great strengths of the program.
Do you think in general IB is for students who are academically prioritized? So, for example, do you think the system is flexible enough to allow for students that aren't only about academics? Would you recommend those people to do IB? Or should academics be your priority beyond your extracurriculars to take the entire IB course, the diploma?
When you clarified the question at the end,
Sure, yeah.
I would say absolutely not, because education has to be a whole process. My best students always have been students that are involved in athletics, involved in the arts, involved in the various extracurricular activities that we have. So absolutely not. I mean, if the question is should it be academics and nothing else, no. That creates one-dimensional people, and I think to a certain extent it creates that kind of instrumental mentality that I was talking about before. I want the whole person. So I would say not necessarily. In fact, some of my most interesting IB students over the years have not been students that were necessarily the absolutely very best academic students, but they were fully capable of dealing with the IB curriculum, and they oftentimes brought insights to the classroom that were just absolutely amazing. Even though they weren't necessarily getting the top grade in the class, their contributions oftentimes were the most out-of-the-box, most interesting contributions in the class.
And then last but not least, how have you personally seen IB affect students? If you had a child, would you want them to do IB maybe?
I do have two children.
Oh, okay. All right.
We're not in the Tracy district, so it's not an option. And unfortunately, Turlock only has AP, and I suppose maybe that's sort of an answer to your question, because I said unfortunately, and I think that AP does not offer as rich an experience. AP, I think, is very much more tailored towards creating, that kind of instrumentalized mentality where it's just about, I'm taking this class to get the extra grade point to get into college. I would recommend my kids to go into an IB type program. I think students, I think there's a lot to be gained by the way that IB asks students to think in terms of the way they structure their assessment. And I'm thinking particularly about HA1 and philosophy here. If you look at the terminal exams for both of those classes, the exams that you'll take in May,
right.
They are not just, here's a bunch of facts, you better give us those facts. The philosophy exam is fabulously open-ended, and what it steers the curriculum of philosophy to do is to give students as many tools as possible to think about the world that they live in. And then the assessment basically says, use the tools that you've gotten, make something with it. And I mean, that's education. That's education at its best. And I think HA1 does the same thing. Instead of saying, here are 47 things, know all of them, HA1 gives you a framework of the curriculum and says, focus on a few things and make sure that your students are conversant in those areas and can make cogent and well-articulated arguments in those areas. So those would be the two things that I would say are the biggest benefits. We give kids the tools to think, and then we ask them to think creatively rather than just kind of regurgitating what is said to them. Last thing that I'll add to that, there's a big push now nationwide for something called Common Core. At its best, ideally, Common Core is what IB does. It's basically about critical thinking and giving kids the tools to think for themselves, and then asking them to go out and solve problems. If the Common Core movement succeeds, we're going to see our schools become much more like the IB system. If it doesn't succeed, it'll just be another foolish trend in education. I'm hoping for success.
Me too. All right. Thank you, Mr. Haydock.
Thank you.